Okay, I think we'll get started and we might see some people join us over the course of the next couple of moments. My name is Lisa Sear, and I'm happy to welcome you all on behalf of United Way's Healthy Aging program to this Walking Through Bereavement webinar. As you know, this is the third in a series of three with Daneve McAffer. We'll go through more of those details in a moment. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to express United Way's acknowledgement and my own personal acknowledgement as well for the homelands of the Indigenous people of this place we now call Canada, and honor the many territorial keepers of the lands on which we work. Personally, I'm calling in from Revelstoke, which has four nations: the Sinixt, the Ktunaxa, the Swepnik, and the Syilx Okanagan. And I'm grateful to be able to call in from here today. If you would like, you're welcome to pop in your own acknowledgement in the chat. And just a couple of instructions and housekeeping. So everyone is currently muted and will remain muted for the duration of the webinar. As I mentioned, you can introduce yourself in the chat box. You can introduce your name, your pronouns, organization, as well as the territories you're calling in from. And you also have the option to turn on automatic closed captioning using the CC feature at the bottom in your toolbar. And there will also be a brief question period at the end. If you have a question you would like to ask us, please use the Q&A feature, which is different than the chat. We'll, of course, be monitoring both, but it's easier to parse out the questions when they're listed in the Q&A. And so the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on Healthy Aging on the core website. With the slides also available, you'll also find the first two webinars that Daneve has led us through available on that same core website. So as I mentioned, this is the third webinar. Our first webinar was talking about anticipatory grief, and the recording is available on CORE, looking at those first stages when we know when someone has received a diagnosis, for example, or we know that someone will be passing. And then the second is moving through grief, also available on CORE, which looks at those moments in which we are in that space of grief and deep grief, and then walking through bereavement, which is the sort of the end of the process or the continuation of the process of grief moving forward. And that is the topic of today's webinar. I am incredibly pleased to bring in Daneve McAffer, who is our bereavement facilitator. She has, many years of experience having worked as a physiotherapist and occupational therapist within the healthcare system, and has eventually moved on to become a facilitator supporting individuals who are working in hospice supporting them through this process of grief as they carry out their work as well. So Daneve, I'm so grateful to have you here with us today. I'm going to stop my share and allow you to share your screen as well.
Thank you so much. So I can still see you larger. Okay, we're going to start here. The reason is many people say to me, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say to someone who's had a loss of a loved one. I don't know what to say in how to greet them or even run across them in a store somewhere. So we call that the elephant in the room. So I'm going to read this to you and think about grief when I'm reading this. There's an elephant in the room. It is large and squatting, so it's hard to get around. Yet you squeeze by with how are you? And I'm fine. And a thousand other forms of trivial chatter. We talk about the weather, we talk about work, we talk about everything except the elephant in the room. There is an elephant in the room. We all know it's there. We think about thinking of the elephant, we talk together, and it constantly on our mind. For you see, it's a very large elephant. It has hurt us all. But we do not talk about the elephant in the room. Oh, please say his name. Please say Richard again. Oh, please talk about the elephant in the room. I don't know what happened there. Please talk about the elephant in the room. It is large and squatting, so it's hard to get around. Yet we squeeze by with how are you and I'm fine. That's not the one I was on.
Oh, I think for your slide share, it's not up, so I've put up the slides on my side. So you can just tell me when you want me to move to the next slide.
Oh, it wasn't up?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was reading something that wasn't there. Okay, so this is an elephant in the room. It's large and squatting, hard to get around. How are you? I'm fine. And other trivial chatter. So you can go on to the next slide. We talk about thinking of the elephant. We talk together. It's a very large elephant. It has hurt us all. And we talk about the elephant in the room, but we don't say the name. So please say his name. Please say Richard. Next. Oh, please talk about the elephant in the room. For if we talk about his death, perhaps we can talk about his life. Can I say Richard to you and not have you look away? For if I'm not, then you are leaving me alone in the room with an elephant. Next slide. Dr. Alan Wilfeld, who I've had the opportunity to train with in Fort Collins, Colorado, is probably the best guru on grief and mourning. He is someone who has done it for so many years and probably written over 100 books. So he's very knowledgeable. And I had the opportunity to go down and talk with him and spend a couple of days. I think it was about 4 days each time. And also the original hospice director, Maria, went down and trained with him 6 times. And she came back and taught people that wanted to take this, which I did. So that's my background for this part. And I also had the opportunity to work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in Death and Dying. And that was back when I was doing home care and taking people home to die. So Alan Wolfeld, I respect so much. And these are critical questions we can ask. Will I grieve this loss or will I mourn this loss? Will I befriend the feelings that flow from this loss, or will I deny, repress, and inhibit it? Will I be a passive witness to my grief, or will I be an active participant in my grief? Will I embrace the uniqueness of my grief experience, or will I assume I mourn like everyone else? Will I identify the 6 needs of mourning, which we're going to talk about, and work on them, or will I fall victim, to the cliche, time heals all wounds? Will I move forward to reconciliation of my grief, or will I keep trying to get my old self back? With this loss, add to my divine spark, or will it take from my life force? Those are good questions to ask yourself on how you're going to grieve. And it gives you some choices. And I'm sure you can see which is the right one through all of this. Next slide. It is in grief, and I'm just going to go over this because this is from our last session. It's an internal expression of loss, happens automatically because of that love. Grief and love are twins. Grief is pain. Grief affects us, is not just emotionally, but physically, socially, and spiritually. Next one. Every grief is unique. No 2 people grieve the same. So we can't expect them to act the same or the same things to happen. Find out how their grief is different. What are their losses and secondary losses? We are not there to fix them. We cannot resolve their loss. We do not resolve the grief, but we reconcile it. And that was a key point in the last one, meaning we carry the person with us into where we're going and reflect on memories, etc., with that person. Next one. This is an interesting one. I took this in Austin, Texas, and it was by a person that had done a study around social style awareness. And his was one of understanding self and others. So they used to call it bipolar, our personal iceberg, and then they went to understanding self and others. So it's a relationship model on how we can speak to each other depending on what our strengths are and our tendencies. This is Tommy Thomas and his father who developed this. And I spent 5 days with them understanding this model. At the top of our iceberg, 20% of it is above water. And those are our perceptions and our actions and behaviors. The rest is below water, which is who we are. So this describes you. At the very bottom is our core strengths and operating tendencies. For example, I have 2 daughters. When Chelsea used to wake up, she'd play with her mobile. When Paige used to wake up, I knew right away. So those were their core strengths or tendencies. And so as they grow older, those change by who they meet and what they learn. So from our core tendencies, we choose and develop our values and principles. And that is done in the first 10 years of our life. And then we form our attitudes and our beliefs, our needs and wants. Then we set our personal vision and our goals, and then our opinions, and then that moves into intentions. And probably a good question to ask yourself here, do you think that was the person's intention? Because if I don't understand what I'm being told, I'll say, can you share with me what your intention is? Then that gets to exactly what it is they're trying to communicate. Next one. This is the Thomas concept. It's thinking which is you plan ahead. It's that simple. You like to plan, you write lists, etc. And the opposite of that is letting go, it's risking. So it's action to jump into things head first. When I have an electrified web on my outdoor team building, it will be a rope, and I say it's electrified, and I give them a card with all the parameters around it. And the risking strength have already touched the rope by this time and are now blindfolded. So then the thinking strength steps up and helps them get through the web. That's the difference, but it's a balance between two of them that we have. So we're all kind of in the middle because we've learned that one is our tendencies that we're born with, the other ones we've learned. Next one is practical theoretical. Practical people are fact-based. They're linear, they're down to earth, and they drive to a result. Theoretical people are idea generators. And so they want the big picture. They want to see the possibilities. And then they focus on the big picture and also look at how we're going to do it. And that's really important. So it's the how versus the facts and the why for theoreticals. Then we go down to dependent and independent. And dependent isn't codependent. It's outwardly dependent. These are team players. These are people like working with the other people. They're people-oriented. They like being around others and have joint decisions. Independent are self-motivated. They'd rather do things on their own. They gain energy by doing things on their own, like going for a walk or going and playing around or golf or whatever it is. It's an independent thinking process. So this is how we move into relationships, the last one. So I'm going to show you something. I want you to take your hands and put them in the air like this and clasp them. And notice which thumb is on top. Everybody remember that thumb. Okay, go into the air, shake them around and clasp them again. Do you have the same thumb on top or a different thumb on top? If you've got the same thumb on top, great. If it's a different thumb, you can give me a call and we can explain that. And then let's go one more time and put the different thumb on top. So clasp them differently. The first two were your core strengths. They're natural. That's what you came into the world with. The other one that with the other thumb on top is your supporting strength. And that is something you've been able to learn to do, but we're more comfortable working in our core strengths, but we know that isn't all we need in the world. So we have to learn the supporting strengths. If I do this enough times, I become more comfortable with my supporting strengths. Next slide. This is the other thing about the Thomas concept, and this is risking and thinking. And risking people have a higher emotional range than thinking strength. My husband is a thinking strength and his 10 touches me about a 5. And I have to even ask him, are you excited about this? Because I don't know. I'm learning. And when I'm up at my 10, he says, you need to calm down. So this is something you'll see in meetings, a thinking and a risking strength. Okay, next slide. This is the important one. So if you can decide if your client is thinking and dependent. So thinking and dependent, they like facts, they don't jump into relationships, they like to be invited in. So in the middle is our zone of collective relationships, creative relationships. So they have to be invited in, or otherwise they just won't say anything. Thinking independent, decide if it's worth it. So they'll go up to the line, and if it's worth it, they'll come across into the zone. If not, they go slowly away. And then risking dependent, and that's me, I tend to go right across and hug the other person, which isn't always welcome. So that's my tendency. And risking independent will tend to walk right through the other person because they're focused on going somewhere. They're focused on their goals or what they've decided they have to do. So this is just a little map to help us understand how we approach people. So if they're thinking and independent, I will give them the fact, give them time to think about it, and then come back. Thinking dependent, I will invite them in. Risking dependent, I don't need to do anything except maybe step back and take time to share it because they may be interrupting you as well. And risking independent, just need to slow down a little bit and we have them pull back a little bit and then you're ready to go. Next one. Why do we mourn? Why do we have to? It's to move forward. It's only through mourning process that we help deal with their grief. Do you know anybody that doesn't mourn, that it keeps it all inside them? That's not very healthy. So when I think of you, I cry, but I don't mind because each teardrop is for you. And each teardrop brings a memory, and each memory brings a smile. And that's what the mourning process is crying, letting go, and talking about the person. Next. So here's mourning. Mourning is the outward expression of grief. It's grief gone public. Mourning is a release of pain and loss. It's through the mourning process that we start to reconcile the loss. Next. Signs of mourning. Its grief becomes public. The outward expression of your pain. We can have grief bursts, and that's when you're driving in the car and all of a sudden you remember someone or a song comes on the radio that causes you to remember them, and you'll have a grief burst. It can be a smell, it can be a memory, it can be a song, whatever it is that causes you to have a grief burst. And so you cry, and then you feel better. And these come on without even realizing they are. Crying and wailing. I had one person, one of my support groups that spent the first 2 or 3 times in the bathroom wailing because she had so much pain. So that's how her mourning started. nightmares or dreams, signs of physical problems, upset stomachs, headaches, feeling powerless, that you don't even know where to turn or how to move forward, unable to make decisions. And for some people, you want to stop living. I have a friend right now who's her husband died, and it became really hard for her to make decisions and feeling powerless. And those are signs of mourning, the beginning of it. Next. These are some factors of the mourning process. They're unable to see the person before they pass, and they know they have passed. Sorry, we're back to another slide. That's okay. And know they have passed, but they can't get to them. Not being by their side. This often happens when people will sit during the dying process, the end of life, where they are comfort care, not curative care, and they go out for supper and the person passes. And this is often the choice of the person that's dying. The circumstance of the death. Out of order death. So that would be losing a grandchild or a daughter or son before you. The mourner's unique or self-blame for the death. That's an interesting one. Self-blame, because you asked them to go out with you, because you asked them to drive over, because you did something that initiated an action, and then you end up self-blaming yourself. The mourner's unique tendencies. History of conflict in the relationship. My brother came out to do the drywall in our basement, and he was out of work at the time, and so he asked for the money because he had to pay his car insurance. He went and paid his car insurance, and I didn't see him. And what was bad about that is he died 6 months later in a car accident, so we never resolved that. So a history of conflict. Disenfranchised, that would be having a miscarriage. Being divorced and still very close to your children and your ex, but not in being invited to the funeral. Second loss due to type of relationship. Second loss could be you're no longer a married person. The things you used to do together, they were your best friend. Concern for others in the mourner's life. This is often children or relatives or friends. The mourner's culture and cultural background makes different to the mourning process. The mourner's religion rather, and carried grief. And carried grief is not grieving when you need to, and so you carry this grief and it becomes complicated grief because you've got more than one grief now to mourn. Next page. This is Dr. Ellen Wolfeld again. You'll hear me talk about it quite a bit. You have the right to your own unique grief. No two people's grief is alike. It has on history, relationship, so many different things. To talk or to be silent, you have that right. To take time. Having the grief purse to your own emotions, not apologizing for them. To rituals and treasures, you treasure your memories. Some people will have rituals and, do an altar in their house with their ashes or whatever, and also a treasure to your memories. To dose yourself and take time to move through this. To your emotional and physical limitations on dealing with it, and to embrace your own spirituality. That is your Bill of Rights. Next. 6 needs of mourning. This is again Dr. Wolfeld, and when I took his course, we went through this in detail. But the first one you have to do is accept the reality of the death. And that might take time. I've had people say, I'm still waiting for him to walk through the door. Or I can't accept that he's gone. And if they were away from doing traveling or a lot, this will even be harder. Letting yourself feel the pain of the loss. It is painful when you lose someone you love so dearly. And you have to experience that pain. Remembering the person who died. This can be looking through photograph albums, talking to other people about them, sharing memories, sharing different things that help. And then you move into developing your new self-identity, because if it's someone you're married to, if it's a child, you're no longer a married person, you're no longer a mother to that child. So you have to start to develop your new identity. And you start searching for meaning. Why? Why did this happen? And the last one is let others help you. So those are the 6 needs of mourning. Next slide. So there's 5 selves. There's the physical self, the emotional self, the cognitive self, the social self, and the spiritual self. And I just put Maslow's hierarchy of needs there because that tells you how complicated we are in how we address all of our needs. So next slide. So these are the stages of mourning. We're going to go through the different selves because every one of these selves mourns differently. So the first stage is walking the edge. That's when you know they're going to die and they have just passed. So you're walking the edge. So stage 1 under social self is you withdraw from relationships and you start having poor judgment. Second stage in social self is you adjust to the loss. You start rushing into new relationships. You become more self-conscious. And stage 3, as life goes on, you start to have energy for social events and visits. So those are the 3 stages. We're walking the edge, adjusting to the loss, and as life goes on. The physical self, you have low energy, sleep problems, digestive problems, headaches, so many symptoms. Stage 2, you have a lack of appetite and you wake up in the night thinking about them. Stage 3, you're more interested in your daily affairs, feeling of emptiness lightens. Emotional self, stage 1, crying, emptiness, outrage. People can get really angry here, outraged that they died. Stage 2, fearful, guilt, and depression. Fearful because you're now alone, or fearful because you don't know where you're going to do, or fearful because so many losses. Guilt, you might have guilt from it, and depression. Stage 3, emotions are less intense. You're coming out of the fog and you start to find more peace. Next slide. Next slide. Mental self, denial, constant thoughts about the person who died. This is stage 1. Stage 2, difficult concentrating and having memory problems. Stage 3, ability to remember with less pain and improved concentration. Spiritual self, wanting to join the person who died and blaming others. I've seen that happen, especially with people that are married. They want to join the person who died or blaming others for their deaths, like a doctor or a hospital. Stage 2, sensing the person who has died, looking for signs. So you believe they're still there. You sense they're in the house. You sense the door closing. You see a butterfly. Whatever it is, you're sensing the person is still around. And the third one, life now has meaning and purpose, acceptance of the death. What helps? This is the things you can try to do that helps you move through these stages of mourning. Make no unnecessary changes and talk about the person. I had one of the people I was with who sold her house within a week because she couldn't stand going into it. And then she grieved it because she sold all the memories with it. So do not make unnecessary changes, even getting rid of his clothing or her clothing. Understand grief and the need to mourn. So as long as you know you need to mourn, do things that help you do that. Engage in activities, plan for the future event, and engage friends. And I think that's important, to start doing things for you and helping to redefine who you are. Next page. Seeking help, reaching out for help. Who can help you? Support groups, hospice volunteer, bereavement, empathetic friends. The need for professional help, that's up to you. Individual grief counselor, pastor or minister. And the one that's up there that's really important is support groups. Next slide. Mourning is a journey. There's no roadmap or direction sign. A journey through the wilderness of loss, not knowing the ending. There are places to stop and remember along the way. There's no timetable or final destination in sight. We meander back and forth, round and round. Loop back on yourself. We may cover the same ground over and over before you can find your new direction. Next. What do we mourn? We mourn the passing of a loved one, the loss of a career, the loss of a pet, children moving out, divorce. You mourn what was, loss of a house, fire, floods, and physical disability. That's my big one now because I just developed Parkinson's. And every couple of months, I mourn a change in my ability. The other thing you mourn is someone that you were visiting for United Way. That you become close to them, you know them. And if they pass on, you still mourn them because they have talked to you or you've talked to them and they become part of your group, your community. So that's another of who we do mourn. Next one. Type of loss. So the first four are sudden, and you don't have a chance for saying goodbye or resolving issues. So a sudden passing, a traumatic death. If it's a traumatic death, you have to deal with the trauma first before you can mourn the loss. Suicide and an accident. I had a traumatic death with my brother who committed suicide in an accident. And I had to get over how it happened before I could mourn him. So that's an example. End of life diagnosis. And this is where you have hope, fear, and you want them to be okay. But you go from curative to comfort care. Loss of a child or a grandchild. That's that out of order death. And that's a hard one because you're often so close to them and they're so young and there's a lot of regrets. Next. These are interesting. These are unhelpful messages. And I don't know if you've heard any of these, but I have. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. He had a good life. That's the one they said about my dad. He was 85. He had a good life, but his parents both lived to 100. So my expectation, he would live to 100. Maybe it is for the best for them. You must be strong and you mustn't cry. You know how you tell them that you know how they feel. The other one is you will get over it. Now you can get on with your life. Everyone eventually dies. There are plenty of fish in the sea. I find those very disturbing. But if you say that to someone, you're saying that they're wrong or they can't handle it or they lose confidence in themselves. So our goal here is self-reliance. Next slide. I like when you're so on it. Hindering bereavement message. Just get over it. How long has it been? It's been a long time and you're still grieving. You should be whatever you shouldn't feel, the shoulds. Be strong. Don't think about it. Stay busy. It's over. Life goes on. You can't bring them back. Those are real hindering messages for someone who's lost a loved one. Next slide. Greatest tool is being present. It's listening to understand, not respond. This is so important. In my support groups, I always say to them, listen to understand, not respond, because they'll often start to share their own story. So listen to understand, not respond. Holding space for them. And that may be they stop talking for a while. So you just hold the space until they're ready to move on. Empathy. It's good to have empathy, to feel what they're feeling. You can't know exactly what they're feeling, but you know how you would feel in that situation. Time really does heal. But healing is reconciliation, not resolution. Building trust. When you're working with a client, you have to build trust. Have no set goals. Whatever happens, happens. If I give myself an hour to see someone or a half an hour, that is not a good thing to do. That is a set goal and I may not be done. So whatever, I never book someone right after because I may take longer with that client. The saying here that listen, please listen, listen, I need to share. We don't have a communication problem, we have a listening problem. Takes 2 years to learn to talk and about 60 learns to learn to be quiet, at least in my life. Next. Building the trust, helping people move through mourning. Reach out and make contact. So have a talk first with them on the phone. Just reach out, make contact, tell them who you are and what you'd like to talk to them about. Be present emotionally and physically with them. They will remember you were there, but they may not remember what you talked about. I remember hearing a story of a man that was sitting with his wife holding her hand. And he got up. This person came in and sat beside them. And then he got up and left without saying anything to the man or his wife. The man next day in church said, "Thank you for visiting my wife. It made a big difference." He hadn't said a word. So they'll remember you were there. It is how you support them is key. Do not worry about the right words. Do not sidetrack by sharing your own story. That I see so often. So if they talk about how someone died or what it was like to be with their niece or their cousin or whatever, and it reminds you of your story of your life, it's so easy to jump in and share. The reason we don't want to do that is because it interrupts where they're going. Do not give advice. They have their own advice. They know what they want to do. So don't give advice. Keep appointments and being on time. If you're the only one that's coming to see them, keeping an appointment is really important. And do not make promises you cannot keep. That is the building of the trust. Next slide. These are Wolfelt's as well, and these are the 10 tenets of mourning. Help people mourn. You can get his book. It's called Companioning the Dying, and you can order them offline. of being present to another person. Tenet 2, going into the wilderness of their soul, honoring their spirit, listening with your heart, being witness to their struggle, walking alongside. I use that a lot. Can I walk alongside you? Not in front, telling you where to go, and not behind, pushing you. Discover the gifts of sacred silence. Just being silent and allowing them to process. I remember sitting with someone for an hour before they said a word. And when they finally did talk, they shared a lot. That was sacred silence. Being still, respecting the disorder and confusion, learning from others, and my favorite is curiosity. You'll always know the right question to ask if you're curious about where they are and how they're doing. Next slide. Helpful ideas, setting the environment. You need to start where they're at. You can't start ahead or behind, just start where they're at and they'll share where they're at. Move at a pace the client or mourner needs, which is usually a slow pace. Have them talk about memories of their loved one. I'll often look at the pictures on the wall and say, can you tell me about this picture? Where were you here? Photos are great, favorite music, places they like to go, and food they liked, anything to bring back memories for the mourner. Ask them how they are feeling. And if they say fine, ask them what fine means. Because fine is not the answer. So tell me what fine means to you, and they will. They'll start to share more. After listening, the next question connects to the last comment. So if they say it's been a really bad week, say, what's happened this week to make it so bad? Or too many people are phoning me. Why is that a concern for you that people are phoning you? And then you go deeper and deeper with your questions. And don't interrupt. If you interrupt, you take away from what they're going to say. And that's why we have to honor silence. Because we can be uncomfortable with silence, but that's what they need is silence. Next one. Active listening. I've just put this in here. It's one I use in all my workshops. So listen to understand, not respond. Acknowledge their feelings. Express their feelings, helping them heading from a devastating loss. Expressing their feelings helps them healing from a devastating loss. Listen for cues and observe body language. Asking open-ended questions. I'm sure you all know that part. Linking to their last comment and feelings. Do not tell them how they feel or look. If you want someone to share, we must listen. So they feel free and invited to talk and share. Listening is the greatest skill in helping someone through mourning. Next one, please. Remembering the person. It's important as people go through, and I use the word important a lot, but it is in remembering the person. That's how they reconcile it, because they bring it with them. So bring the person into the room by mentioning their name, sharing pictures and stories, special occasions, linking objects. Is there something special they have that is the other person's? Share a memorable experience. Share an appreciation of that person. What is missed about them? What do you miss about Richard? Secondary losses. And if it's a married couple, there can be a lot of secondary losses. Grief verses we've talked about and what triggers the memories. Next. Seeking help. Reaching out for help. We can help you. Support groups, bereavement for volunteers. I've had this before, but empathetic for friends, the need for professional help, individual group counselors, pastor and minister. I've put this in twice because seeking help is important. Resolution leads to reconciliation. You cannot resolve the loss, but you can reconcile it. Time passes. They've moved through their grief into mourning the loss. They're talking and telling stories over and over and over. Lessons, releasing the inner pain, finding a new self-direction or self-identity. Healing begins. Grief first lesson, and memories begin to be welcomed. Last slide. Loss changes us. We become more self-reliant, and it does change us. There's not one person in my life that I've lost that has not changed me in some way. Engage in activities. Speak openly about their loss. Reach back into their life and talk about things. Start to disengage from the need to share and find a purpose. At the end, finding a new purpose. I have one client who visited her husband every single day and then sat vigil with him for 4 days. She is now searching for her new purpose. So finding purpose is part of that redefining themselves. Next page. First of all, I'd like to thank United Way for this third and final one and giving me an opportunity. And just because I don't have great computer skills, they accepted it. The caregivers of these Kootenay seniors, which is a group I work with, I run a caregivers group for people that are walking with loved ones that have challenges. The Hospice Society, where all of this started in the Valley for me, and the Invermere Public Library for giving us this beautiful space to be able to present this. All the caregivers that have helped me to understand their learnings has been really important. So with that, we're going to close off this session, and I just want to thank you for being here and being part of it. And it was very nice and very important for me to be able to share my passion.
Thank you so much, Daneve, for speaking about such a difficult process that, as you mentioned, we tend to stash away and hide, but it's that elephant that's there unless we can really face it head on for what it is, and it's easier said than done, I think. So thank you so much for speaking with so much heart about this topic. We do have 2 questions here. I know you did touch on it a little bit, but one question is, after a client has passed, when and how do you say goodbye to the family? So I guess that would be those secondary losses. Also, how do you remember and honor the client who has passed?
What I do is I phone the family and ask if it's okay if I come to a celebration of life or a funeral and be present with them in honoring the passing of that person. And if not, it's a card that I'll send with my heartfelt pain of their loss. So those are 2 ways of doing it. And sometimes the family will give you something to remember them by. And that's wonderful when that happens. And I keep those things very special in my life. Can you explain more about resolving grief versus reconciling grief? Resolving grief is you get over it. You resolve it. It's no longer part of your life. Reconciling grief is bringing that person with you on your journey for the rest of your life and honoring them. With my father, who died so many years ago, I honor him probably every day in some way. Like I'll bake his favorite cookies, or I'll drive through Canmore and stop at where we used to live, or recognize the mountains that he climbed or that I climbed. I'll make his favorite meal, which was roast beef, dinner, mashed potatoes, and turnip with gravy and Yorkshire pudding. So there's different ways of honoring and resolving the grief, but you bring it with you and then you keep his memory alive. And that's what resolution is, or reconciliation is. You reconcile them into your life journey by doing things in their memory. Does that answer your question, I hope?
I wonder, Daneve, if you can speak to maybe the larger sort of heaviness around grief that many people, whether it's a volunteer or a staff person that's working with seniors for a United Way, healthy aging funded program, because of let's say the volume of death that they're encountering. I would think that there's like a larger, more kind of global grief there that is being experienced by some individuals. And can you speak to a way to sort of hold that or manage that if you're someone who's especially sensitive to all of this?
I would first identify who those people are that you can talk to. And then I would set up a debriefing with the team that was working with that person, and having them share memories and talk about them and laugh about them and cry about them and do all those things in memory. And what I do as well is I carry the pictures of those people in my head all the time, and I've still got them on my computer. And I'll go back and look at them and remember. And I don't think you ever resolve it. I think you just carry more people with you in your life as you go forward. And the closer you are, the more they affect you. I've had one client here in Windermere who I saw for 2 years. And she was on the phone talking to one of her good friends when she just collapsed, and that was it. She was in my life a lot after that. I would drive past her house. I would talk to her husband. I'd talk to her friends. I would remember her laugh. I did a lot of things in bringing her forward with me in everything I did. And her favorite thing was baking. Every time I went in there, she had cinnamon buns or muffins or something. So that's another thing. She loved, I gained about 5 pounds in those 2 years seeing her, but she loved to give you food. So with every person, it's different, and how you choose to reconcile it and bring it forward. And I pick up on what was important to me, talk about it with others. So you're sharing your grief, which is important. And even on the year of their passing, do a celebration. A lot of people release balloons in the air, which pilots may not like, or the birds and may not like, but having some celebration of her life every year, or his life every year, with people that knew them or were with them at the end. We're celebrating that person I talked about. We're celebrating her life this spring. And the saddest thing for me about that was her first grandchild was being born, and this was COVID, and the baby was born, and they were going to come out and see her, but they couldn't because of COVID. And COVID had just ended. And so they were going to come out that weekend so she could get a picture with her grandchild, her first and only grandchild. And she died before she was able to do that. So that's one of the hardest things that I've had to get over, is that her one goal in life, her greatest joy, was that new grandchild. And so we weren't able to do that. So different things happen that are harder to reconcile. Another one is the passing of my father, who begged me not to leave the room. He was had a viral infection of his brain stem. They said he'd be dead in 8 weeks, and me going down to Calgary from Edmonton to a conference for a school board was what was most important to me, because I'd only gone 3 days. But when I was in his room saying goodbye that day, he said, please don't go. And when I came back, he wasn't there. He had passed. He's still there. I held his hand and said, Dad, I'm here. He squeezed my hand, but he wasn't talking anymore. So sometimes we make decisions that aren't the right decisions, but know that we always do our best. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. We have about 4 minutes left. I see Amanda, who is our volunteer support coordinator, has put a comment. This is for programs agencies who have volunteers and community-based seniors. It can be helpful to make connections with local grief and bereavement groups and or hospice services so that you have resources and referral information on hand for volunteers. And, my sense is that this is such a universal, experience that while it's helpful in your role as a volunteer or as a a housekeeper or whatever your role might be, it's also just personally such a good foundation to carry forward just for moving through your own personal grief and experiences. We all move through life, so thank you so much for that.
If I can make one comment about that, sometimes you burn out and you can't do it anymore. And that's okay because someone else will step into it. But the more you can grieve the loss and deal with it, the more control you have over your own pain. And when I was bringing people home to die from the university hospital, I burnt out because of somebody I worked with for so long. And all she wanted was for me to be by her side. And she was laying outside her door when I got to her floor. So things like that happen where you hope to walk in the house and see them, but sometimes it doesn't happen. But just know the times you were there for them. And that's what you have to hang on to. That's it.
An important reminder. Thank you so much, Daneve. We're pretty much at time, so we'll end the webinar here. If anyone has any questions, you can funnel them through any one of us here at United Way. We can forward them to Daneve. We'll be sharing the recording as well as the slideshow on the core website, so keep your eyes open for that. And once again, thank you so much, Daneve, for sharing with us all that wisdom that you've gathered over the years as well in all of your roles. We've got Amanda posting her email in the chat. I'll also post mine. And thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week.